Hello.
Hi, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
Cool. Right. What do we want to talk about then?
I'll just start off with what you do, how you got here, and all the other stuff, and just go with the flow with stuff.
Okay, cool, man. Right. Well, I started writing when I was 45. I came to it very late. Prior to that, I'd been a journalist, I'd been a graphic designer. So, I'd always kind of worked with words. Um, but I kind of had an idea for a story when I was about 19 years old. It was kind of like a post-apocalyptic horror story. I started sort of putting that together then, but life went in a different direction, so I just sort of shelved it. And then when I got to the age of 45, I'd moved from where I was in England. I'd moved to the kind of northwest of England from the northeast, and got into a relationship with Anne. And I was talking to her one night, and she said, what is it that you really kind of want to do? And I said, oh, I always really wanted to write. And she was kind of like the first person who said, well, yeah, well, then do it. I'll support you. I'll help you, get yourself a job, get yourself a part-time job when you've moved over here, and just kind of write on the evenings. So I did that. I put out my first novel. But I didn't go down the sort of traditional route of looking for a publisher. Don't ask me why. I kind of thought it would probably be a big headache, to be honest. I thought, well, I'll have to finish writing this thing. I'll have to edit this. Then I'll have to send it off to lots of different places and kind of wait a long time. So I didn't do that, and I just kind of continued. Once I'd done the first one, I wrote a second one after that, and I just kind of kept going doing it DIY via Amazon, and I did that for about, oh God, let me think, 5 or 6 years. Put out my own works, put them out via Audible, but I kind of felt like I wasn't making a great deal of headway. So I decided. Anne kept saying to me, you really should send your work off to publishers. So I said, okay. So sort of early on in 21, I sent a novella off to, oh God, about 15 different publishers or something like that. And by the end of the year, I heard back from two who were interested. So it kind of changed my path. I signed a contract with a publisher in Kansas called Bridges Gate, run by Steve and Heather. Like that's where I am now. They've been working to put my novella out, which is coming out next month. So that's kind of how I've arrived at this point.
Hmm. Okay. Wow, that's impressive history you got there.
It's yeah, it's well, sort of. It's kind of like, it was. I sort of arrived here at this point, sort of later in life, but I kind of felt that maybe that it was the right time, because, I think if I'd have tried to write things when I was younger, I think I probably had the innate ability, but I just didn't have enough of the craft. So I think it's probably all been for the best for it to sort of happen now. So yeah, so that's how I arrived here.
Fabulous. And how long you've been doing this for?
Well, I started 2015. I started penning the first novel. So I guess we're sort of, but I mean that was late. That was in the December. So I would say for about 6 years, I've been working on my own releases, uh, and then this one is going. I mean, really, Peter. To be honest with you, I would have done things entirely a different way if I'm honest with you. I started off, it's kind of like diving into the ocean. Like the first novel I wrote was 105,000 words. Now, bearing in mind, I'd never written anything of that size before in my life. And then the second novel was 103. So I didn't realize kind of like how big a task that is. It's really what they call a marathon in terms of writing. I think what I would have done is, had I done things differently, I would have started off just writing short stories and submitting them out to. Um, but the truth of it is, I didn't really. I kind of got into something that I didn't know the lie of the land. I didn't know the landscape of the whole thing. So I just thought, oh well, if you write a book, then you've got to write a big novel. Whereas I've since learned that what I could have done was exactly that: send off short stories, or I could have written, I don't know, maybe half a dozen short stories and put them out as a collection, or then maybe write a novella, which is only up to 40,000 words. So I really dove in at the deep end, and at one point I think I was at about 50,000 words, and I was working full time. I was doing this on an evening and a weekend, and I was so exhausted. I really was, and I kind of reached a sort of point where I thought, oh, I'm really sinking here. I don't know how to sort of continue on with this and finish it. My partner at the time, Anne, she turned around and she said, well, look, just take a break from it. Have a few weeks off, have a month off. There's no pressure. Just take that time away. So I did, and then I came back to it, and that's how I allowed to finish it, because I got the impetus again to carry on. But my advice would be to anyone starting out would be to start small. Don't go for the big things straight away. And you've got to sort of know what the market is. That was another thing. I didn't really know. I didn't know anything about it, to be honest. I wasn't really sort of connected on social media or anything like that to sort of writing communities or other authors. So I kind of had to do all of that from that point on. So I hadn't kind of put that in place first.
That's nice. Is there any books you're planning on writing and or publishing very soon?
Yes. Well, I'm actually working on a collaboration at the moment. There's a lady, a wonderful author called Beverly Lee, down south, and she's pretty much done everything DIY herself. She's quite well known for writing sort of vampire novels, and but also sort of gothic novels as well, sort of your traditional sort of haunted house, that kind of thing. And she's a fantastic writer. So what happened was, back in 2020, I put out an anthology called Diabolica Britannica. And really, what all that was at the time was just let's get an anthology of UK writers, horror writers, and it was, what can we do it for? Well, at the time, obviously, the pandemic was kind of exploding then at that point. So we said, well, okay, we'll do it for sort of research for that. So that's what we did. So Beverly first sort of came onto my radar then because she submitted a story for that, and then sort of a couple of years down the line, I'd put out a lot of things. She'd put out a lot of things. And I just kind of messaged her and I said, are you interested in doing a collaboration? So she said, yes. So we're working on a novella, which is vampire themed. It's called A Light of Little Radiance. And what that's about is it's about a sort of a troupe of vampires who are traveler folk. And so, but it's quite sort of historic. So it goes through sort of time periods, bringing it up to date. So you kind of go back to medieval times with it when it starts. And what I wanted to do was, I didn't want to do a kind of traditional vampire themed story. How someone gets bitten and it's kind of like something's passed on from a master vampire or whatever. I wanted to do something different. So this one has kind of got a sort of cosmic horror sort of thing, whereby the female lead in it, she's kind of traveling on her own in the beginning, and she's had to evade a pack of wolves, because it's kind of like in the frozen north, and she falls through a crevasse in a glacier, and she ends up in a cavern, and that's basically was there thousands of years ago, and it was like a civilization that were worshipping something from a different dimension. So what happens is she gets kind of attacked by that thing that's been in a dormant state, in hibernation there, and it makes her into a vampire, which is just kind of like a hybrid of what it is and what a human being is. So then she gets out of there and she goes back to civilization, and she decides that she wants to create others like herself, because she doesn't want to continue on and exist down the ages just on her own. So because she's lost any ties with humanity because of that. So basically she creates this troop of vampires. They go around, they juggle, they entertain, they go to sort of big celebration, to royalty, for those kinds of celebrations. And then that's when they feast. But ultimately, they have to evade a witch hunter, because it's at a time in Europe where it's in hysteria with the witch hunts that are going on. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. I'm doing other things like editing pieces of work for other authors as well. So, but the main focus for now is obviously the novella, which is coming out via Brigid's Gate next month. It's what I wanted to do with that one was I like to sort of challenge myself. So I said, right, I want to create a story about witchcraft, but I want to do it in a very traditional way. I want to do it in a fairy tale way, but with adult themes. So I set myself a really sort of quite difficult parameter of trying to take it as a child's story, but with adult themes. So, for instance, what you would normally do as an author, you would normally say, right, I'm going to create a main character and I'm going to flesh that character out. So I'm going to give them a name, I'm going to give them a description, I'm going to tell you various things about how they feel. But with a child's fairy tale, it's a very simplistic story. So, like, what I had to do was I had to confine myself to not really giving a lot of information about characters in there. So, traditionally you would have, characters like the woodcutter or the prince or the baron or the witch. So I kind of had to sort of, focus it right down on that and just stick with that throughout, and sort of you rely on description of the character in certain scenarios in order to try and tell you things about those characters. So it was quite challenging in a way, but Heather at Brigid's Gate, she loves, so basically it found its true home. So so that's pretty much everything at the moment. Yeah.
Wow, incredible.
Thank you.
Welcome. So, what was life for you growing up?
Growing up,
Yeah.
very different, very, very different. I was from a very small community, a pit village actually in the northeast of England. So my world was kind of, it was like a postage stamp. It wasn't very big. It was, if we played anywhere, we played out in the street. I mean, I'm a child of the 70s. I was born late 69, so I grew up throughout the 70s. Well, a hell of a lot of austerity. And in terms of opportunities and prospects, there wasn't a great deal. I was schooled in a very small village school, and then obviously for the sort of secondary town, which would be Sunderland. Sunderland's a city now, but it was classed as a town then, and that was kind of like 5 miles away on the bus. So, for me at the age of kind of 10 or 11, that was kind of like, oh my God, I'm leaving my small village and going out to the big bad world. So it was kind of like a big sort of jarring experience, really. It was kind of like being plucked from sort of, I mean, I wouldn't say it was a rural place where I grew up. I mean, it used to be a long time ago, but it was certainly backwater. So to be sort of suddenly picked up and have to be thrust into a big sprawling town was kind of, it was a bit jarring for me, to be honest. And then I guess also that was where I found out about, the sort of life is quite a competitive thing, because I was put into an all boys school, a Roman Catholic all boys school, and it was very, very strict. And we used to get lots of homework on a night, sometimes 2 or 3 hours homework. I mean, we used to do things like Latin and classical studies and all these very dry subjects. And it was very, very strict, because it was a school that was used to such high performances and being high up on the rankings tables and all this kind of thing. So yes, there was kind of like lots of pressure. I was put in quite a low group when I first got there. I think they didn't really sort of know anything about what intelligence I had. So I had to sort of, well, not prove myself, but I think they just sort of, they saw my work and then they thought, all right, we've got him in the wrong group here. So they kind of moved me up to the sort of upper levels of the class structure, which I stayed in for the rest of the time I was there. But I think, to be honest with you, I got so sick and I got so tired of the academic sort of surroundings and all the pressure, that by the time I was about 15, I started discovering music and bands and drinking. So it kind of all went off the rails there for me, to be honest with you. I mean, the expectation was I would go on and I would go to university and I would go, all this kind of things. And, the expectations would be that my grades and my results were, because I mean, in my mocks, I passed every single one of them, you know what I mean? I got like really high marks and passed every exam, but I just kind of went off the rails towards the end. And I think it was probably rebellion when I look back on it all. I think it was kind of, I am so sick of all of this strictness that I just want to have a good time now. So I think what that did was it just made life harder in terms of when I got sort of spat out from school and into the jobs market. There wasn't a lot of opportunities for anything that I wanted to do, certainly not in the Sunderland area. I mean, I do recall I went to the job centre and I had an interview with someone, what they were called at the time, and I think I was about 18 at this point in time, and I'd just done a course for graphic design at that point. I'd come through it. It was like 2 years. And I said to the woman, I want to do graphic design. And she said, oh, okay. So she looked around and she said, there's nothing really of that opportunity here. Have you considered being a butcher? So I just kind of looked, and when you think to yourself, oh God, there's just no hope. So like the options really was I could be a bricklayer, or I could be a butcher, or I could go and work in the supermarket, or I could go maybe down any of the pits that were still open at that point in time. So basically where all my talents and all my skills lay, there just weren't any opportunities. So I decided, oh, well, kind of bugger this. I'll make my own opportunities. So like in my early 20s, I decided I went on a business, and I wanted to work in graphic design. That's really what I wanted to do. But then I decided I was going to have my own magazine. So I went on a business course. I wrote a 40-page business plan. There was 30 of us on the course. By the time the course was over, there was only me left. Everybody else had left because they hadn't managed to get any funding for their business idea. So I think I raised about £13,000 or something from the bank and from grant funding for my magazine. So I set up a magazine, which was just a regional thing at first, and then I put some issues out. I managed to get some exposure for it on national TV for free, and then a magazine distributor down in East Sussex called Diamond Distribution, probably not going these days. They reached out to me and said, "Do you want to take this national?" And I said, "Oh, God, that's a big step. I've only sort of really been going sort of half a year at this point." And they said, "Well, with our guidance and everything, we can get you into the news trade and we can get this national." So that's what I did. I went back to the bank manager. I got more money. I pumped it in, and then I had a national magazine that was on newsstands and airports and everything around the country. So all of a sudden, I was kind of in a situation where I was having to commute down to London all the time, and sort of talking to sort of record labels in America and in Europe and things like that. So I get to interview their bands that were coming on to do European tours and things. So ultimately, after that, once that crashed and burned because the printer pulled the contract on me. I ended up in newspapers, so that's how I became a journalist. I went to regional newspapers in Newcastle, which was called Media at the time, and I ended up working as a graphic designer in one department, and then I switched to the editorial side of things to become a journalist. So that was my career path from school. There you go in a nutshell.
Wow. That is quite the story.
Yes, it's quite. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. Yeah, it's. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I found it rather difficult in journalism because there was this kind of, back then. I don't know what it's like these days, but back then it was kind of, it was very much old boys club. Have you been to a certain university? Did you wear a certain school tie and badge? And I didn't do any of that, so I kind of found that I had to prove myself sort of 10 times over in order to sort of move up the ladder. But I did. I mean, by the time I was 29, I was a senior sub editor. I was like the youngest senior sub editor they'd ever had in the buildings, because they were normally in their 40s, people with sort of vast experience. There was many times the production editor would leave to go on meetings, and they put me in charge of the production of the newspaper. So, I did prove myself ultimately, but it was quite hard because there was, people trying to sort of keep you down and all the rest of it. But I wasn't having any of it. I was young and fiery in those days, whereas I'm a lot more chilled out these days because I don't really feel I've got that much more to prove anymore. So there you go.
Incredible. So at this point now, where would you see yourself 20 years from now?
Probably dead. Well, I mean, I'm coming up to 53. I'm 53 in December. So, but it's funny, because I kind of feel I've always done the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be in bands. I did all that. I toured the country. I even shook hands on a record deal, which never materialized. Then I shook hands on a management deal that never materialized. So because there's a lot of swindlers in that industry. So yeah, and then I also I had my own business. I put my magazine out nationally. Then I went into newspapers. I did that. So I kind of feel like I've always done the things that I wanted to do. So now I'm totally focused on being an author. And my writing, in terms of where I see myself, what I want to do is I just want to grow my profile, and I want to do it organically. I don't want all of a sudden to be sort of catapulted into anything that I think is, this is going too fast. You know what I mean? I mean, I do have a publicist now, a guy called Mickey at Creative Edge in America. And he's been assigned to me by the publisher, by Bidrit's-Gate. So, what I would like the Holy Trinity, if you like. So, not only a publisher, not only a publicist, I would like an agent. So what I've been doing is I've been querying agents for probably about the last 6 months now. I mean, I've had some feedback. Oh, your work's a lot of merit to your work. We like your work, but we just feel it's not what we'd like to represent, because obviously agents decide, they might want to represent someone who's writing middle grade or young adult, as opposed to, I mean, all of the things I write are adult, So I need to find an agent as well, because ultimately what I want to be in a position with anything that I write from now on, novellas or novels, I want to be in a position where it can be optioned for film, or it can be sort of taken up by the streaming platforms like Netflix or whoever. And you can't really sort of get into that territory unless you have an agent. So all I'm doing at the moment is everything that I write, everything I'm planning on the writing front, I'll always be putting that out to publishers. So really, it's about trying to just grow my profile. And I would, I don't. A lot of people, I guess, in these kind of scenarios are sort of chasing fame, but I'm not really interested in that. I think what I would like is to get to a point where I can make a living from it. So currently I have a part-time job and I'm a writer, but I just want to be in a position where I can sell enough books, I can go to conventions, I can do these sort of public events, speaking or whatever, and it's enough that I can make a living from it, and a comfortable living. And I guess that's really, what my ambition is with the whole thing. So that would be it. Yeah.
Incredible. And what has been the highlight of your week so far?
The highlight of my week.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I don't know if are you familiar with the horror community at large, or do you not really know much about the global horror community?
I have some knowledge of the horror community.
Right. Have you heard of a woman called Sadie Hartman? She's known as Mother Horror.
No, I don't think I do.
Right. Okay. Well, anyway, she's you'll find her on Twitter. You'll find her on most social platforms, to be honest. I think she's on Instagram and TikTok and all the rest of it. She lives out northwest, sort of Seattle way, sort of Washington way over in America. But she's a big advocate for horror. So there's like within the horror community on the socials, she's very well known. She was asked by my publisher to blurb my novella that's coming out. So you know what that means by blurb? It means kind of reading it and writing, which is a sort of marketing blurb which goes on the backs of books. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So she wrote one for my book, and that has definitely, without a shadow of a doubt, been the highlight of my week, because she's so well known, she's so passionate about everything, and if she's interested in your work, then you're doing something right, So it's kind of like I've had Mother Horror's seal of approval on my work, so that has definitely been the highlight of my week. I was buzzing from that, I really was.
Wow. Yeah, that is a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and I mean, I've had other author guys, and sort of message me and say, "Oh, wow, that's really cool," So it's it's nice. It's I feel like I've been doing this quite some time, obviously, sort of writing for the last 6 years, and it's nice to sort of that all that hard work has sort of been appreciated. So it's lovely. It's a nice thing to happen.
It sure is. And that is all we have for this episode. It was great having you here, Keith, talking about your work as an author, your origin starting from the bottom to the top, and everything else. It's been amazing.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for this opportunity. It's been wonderful talking to you. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
Okay, fabulous.
And until next time, stay opinionated.